In a rare manner, Senate returned to plenary on Saturday for an emergency session, granting accelerated considerations and passage to two separate but related bills. On one hand is the amendment of the CBN Act, increasing the threshold of borrowings, otherwise known as Ways and Means, from the Apex Bank from 5% to 15% of federal government revenue for the previous year. According to the Senate leader Ibrahim Gobi, the amendment was required to help government meet its immediate and future obligations.
Permit me to lead the debate on the bill, which seeks to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN Act to increase the total CBN advances to the federal government from 5% to maximum of 15%.
The CBN advances to the federal government stood at 700 billion before 2015. The borrowing rose to 22.7 trillion as of December 2022, exceeding the threshold of 5%, thereby violating Section 38 of the CBN Act.
This looks to me like a one-off. Now, are you amending the CBN Act to reflect a one-off? Or is it going to be something that will be happening all the time? Because this is an unusual happening.
Even more troubling was that the monies were borrowed and spent without necessary approval from the Senate, in clear violation of the Constitution.
The issue of securitization still comes in, because if 15% is taken, I don't see how it can be paid off within the stipulated time of 1 year that is in the CBN Act.
What is crucial again is oversight, because you are giving government more space, and what that means is government can utilize the opportunity there, but I don't think we should allow the kind of thing that happened from 2016 to 2023, accumulating this kind of ways and means without the checks that are necessary.
In addition, the CBN Act further stipulates that all advances shall be repaid within the same financial year they were borrowed, and if such advances remain unpaid at the end of the year, the power of the CBN to grant further advances in any subsequent year shall not be exercisable unless the outstanding advances have been repaid. The federal government has repeatedly violated this condition as well. Senate in December passed 819 billion supplementary bill for 2022, following requests by President Muhammadu Buhari to borrow the money from the CBN to finance critical infrastructure damaged by flood across the country. The borrowing increased federal government's Ways and Means to a whopping 23 trillion naira, slightly higher than the entire budget for 2023. But the releases for the supplementary budget, whose implementation is expected to end in June 2023, have been slow in coming, explaining why the Senate, in a last-minute push, returned to work on a Saturday to amend the 2022 Supplementary Appropriation Act Amendment Bill, extending its validity to December 2023. In doing so, the Senate also amended the CBN Act, expanding the borrowing threshold from 5% to 15%, providing possible legal backing for the excess borrowings in the last 7 years, and also giving wider room for the incoming government to borrow more. Omo Bazwai, Arise News.
Well, thank you, Omo Bazwai, for that report. And we do have in the studio with us Paul Alaje, an economist and a senior economist as well at SBN Professionals. Right person to have this conversation with. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Because, for the ordinary Nigerian, they're trying to understand what this really means. The Senate says, this was to help the government meet present and future obligations. That's increasing, what can be taken by the federal government from the CBN from 5 to 15%. But you as an economist, what do you make of this?
Okay, so first of all, Nigerians need to know the meaning of Ways and Means. Ways and Means is that provision that the Act allows the central bank to give federal government 5% of the previous year actual revenue. That is, if you generate, for instance, in 2021, government revenue was 4 trillion naira, as against over 8 trillion naira government was projecting. So what government should have gotten as ways and means in 2022 should have been 5% of 4 trillion. But that's not what happened. What happened is that government moved the ways and means by 91.27% just in 2022. So as against just 5%. Why? Because the fundamental issue that is wrong with our fiscal life has not been fixed, which is revenue generation. So government, we have need to spend, but what government is not looking at is how do I get this money? So ways and means itself is supposed to be 5%. Now it's being moved to 15%. Now the question is, what happens to 23 trillion naira? 23 trillion naira has now been added as part of our debt stock. In a way, we have self-medicated. In economics, what we have done is we became a doctor of economy to ourselves of some sort. We became an economics, a pharmacy of economics to ourselves. We became, we started prescribing economic drug for ourselves without knowing that those who are put those marks there have specific reasons. So unfortunately, what we are owing grew from a domestic loan alone, 8.8 trillion to about 27.6 trillion naira, just by taking that decision. What does it mean? It has implication. You know, when your domestic loan continue to increase, it has implication on employment, it has implication on so many other things, and it can crowd out investment. So, but that said, but let's look at the numbers. You asked me what it means. You know, the meaning for the economy is that we now have more debt and government has chance to borrow. But even if government meet the target of 2023 budget, President Buhari is spending 5 months of the 2023 budget. President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu will spend 7 months of 2023 budget. Let's assume the target of over 10 trillion naira is met. Government cannot collect under these new realities. Government could only collect 1.57 trillion naira as ways and means. But what is ways and means? It's only to meet delayed revenue that government is expecting that they didn't get. So that government, as soon as the revenue comes, it's supposed to be retired. Okay, yeah. But unfortunately, from 2016 to 2022, that's not what happened. If you look at what it was, by 2015 May, it was 790 billion naira. But by 2022, it grew to, by 2023, it has grown to 23 billion naira.
Paul, make me understand. Big issue. Isn't this a reflection, this increment from 5% to 15%? If I understand you properly, isn't this a reflection of what had happened to our budget performance of the previous year?
It is. The budget has not, when you talk of budget performance, what economists look at is a different thing. What government is looking at is a different thing. Most of the time, government will say, in terms of expenditure, we have released. Whether you release as the project, the money released, or has it been implemented, it's a different conversation that is beyond the scope of this meeting. Now, we are not generating revenue enough. In 2018, President Buhari was so exact when he said the biggest challenge anybody in the Senate had was not 2019 election. He said the biggest challenge anybody would have, both national and subnational, both federal and subnational, would be how to finance 2019 budget. It was so correct, because when you look at what government generated as again what government had projected for 2019, it was a disaster. In 2020, COVID year, in fact, we generated far less than what we projected. And I just told you of almost 50% or so of 2023. We have not been performing.
That's my point.
We have not been performing.
Okay,
so what should we do? Exactly. Government is losing 8 trillion naira that government has refused to collect. Why? Because of not having the requisite knowledge and technology to collect from 2 sectors in Nigeria alone. So if you have 2 sectors and you collect that amount of money from 2 sectors that has not been paying, unfortunately, the strategy would be, how do we get more company income tax? The reality was done on Ministry of Finance that, hey, there are some businesses that are doing less than 25 trillion. We need to exempt them for even paying the CIT. And you see, corporate income tax is not what is sufficient. Technology has helped countries to find other taxes. And for companies that are making revenue from our country in tens of trillion naira, even though that may not be official. But what is official is something else entirely. But if you have technology, you can know what the revenue is. And I hope that those in authority, perhaps
Paul,
those that
you need to expand on this, because at the end of the day, the truth is the government needs money to carry out, its project and critical infrastructure. We know that this good administration says it's important, and of course they need to keep borrowing to service that. But this actually shows us that the country needs to diversify its ways of making money. And some would say maybe the country is even broke. 23 trillion owing to the CBN alone is a lot. You talked about 2 revenue streams that the government is not tapping into. You need to expand on that, because we do have an incoming administration coming in a matter of days. So maybe they might listen to that. And also marry that with, the ways and means. Is that the only way we can actually raise revenue in Nigeria? Is that the only way out?
Now, government have not just collected money from ways and means. Government have collected money, both bilateral borrowing, multilateral, raising T-bills, treasury bills, raising money. But all of these collection, why may and means is terrible is because it is what economics call printing money. I'm sure you've heard some governors saying we are printing money, and people were like, oh, are they going to mint it and printing to print? When you raise such money from central bank, you have increased printing money from 790 billion in May 2015 to 23 trillion. It has implication on inflation. You are wondering why central bank continue to say, oh, we are increasing NPR, and NPR is also dependent on where ways and means would be, because of the law, plus 3%. So even if you say that the ways and means for what has been securitized by the National Assembly gave government approximately 3 years moratorium and said after that you start paying 9% single digits. You see, the truth is all of these have implications. You cannot self-medicate where there are professionals that could have advised you, because we became the borrower and suddenly we became the lender, and suddenly we also use policy to pay back.
Now, Paul,
I just answered the question about the 2 sectors we are not.
The 2 sectors are not new. The National Bureau of Statistics revealed during COVID and post-COVID that of all the sectors, there are 7 sectors that are going in leaps and bounds. This sector, even during COVID, while other sectors were going negative, they are growing positive. Unfortunately, what went negative was remitted to government as revenue. You don't say that on national television.
Okay, now
you don't say that on national television.
Paul, you see, I just didn't want to jump.
Why I said that is because it should not look as an attack on those sectors. But for those who can just take one step further to research what the agency of government called the national, you see, until we find a place for that agency, National Bureau of Statistics, a lot has gone into research, and it is commonly said that if you want to add something from a black man, put it in a book. Now keep it online. Will a black man have time to go and research and say 2019 what were we making, which sector is making more money, how come what is coming from this sector is reducing when FRS and all the IRS are in the state? Where is the money? As one of the agencies, it's even beyond just talking on national television. There are about 2 of them that can add between 8 to 10 trillion naira only to government covers.
But Paul is refusing to tell us that. Well, Paul Alaje, an economist, of course, senior economist as SPM professionals. Thank you for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you so very much for having me.